Monday, and welcome to Reading the Bible is Easy-ish, a weekly video and podcast where we explore a text from the Bible each week, usually with a guest. If you are new to the show or you haven't done so yet, I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast, or on YouTube if you watch the video form, and also rate, review, and share. It's by you telling other people that the podcast can grow. So if you're enjoying the podcast, please share it with a friend. This is the day after Easter. This is Monday after Easter Sunday. And if you are not related to a pastor, perhaps you're not particularly close to anyone who's on staff at a church, you may wonder what a pastor or a pastoral team does the Monday after Easter. And let me tell you, nothing is what most pastors do. This week, I reached out to a number of different colleagues, friends, people that I admire who are on church staffs or in spiritual community that was leading through Holy Week. And all of them said, I'd love to, but this is Holy Week and I'm busy this week, and I will not be available Monday because I need to rest. So if you're wondering what your pastor is doing right now, they're probably sleeping, hanging out on their couch, maybe going for a walk. It's been a busy week for pastoral staff, so keep them in your mind. Maybe reach out and just say thanks. So this will be another solo edition of the show, and I just want to say that doing it on my own is a little weird. So remember that this is far from a definitive understanding of the text that we're going to engage. It's intended really just to kind of grease the wheels at the beginning of the week. Grease the wheels of our mind to engage the text on our own or with our family, spouse, friends, whatever, before we come and encounter the text again on Sunday. Our texts have been following a series that my church, 7th Street Christian Church, has been doing during the Lenten season. But having passed Easter, we're now out of Lent and into normal time. And so we're shifting back to the Revised Common Lectionary. And if you're not familiar with that, I'd encourage you to Google it, Revised Common Lectionary. You can find some good resources for the Revised Common Lectionary on Vanderbilt's website. But the Revised Common Lectionary is used in churches and by people around the world each week to guide which texts they are engaging. And so our text this week is John 20:19 through 30. And I'm going to be reading from the New Revised Standard Version. Again, that's John 20:19 through 30. When it was evening on that day, the first day of the week, the doors of the house where the disciples had met were locked for fear of the Jews. Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. Then the disciples rejoiced when they saw the Lord. Jesus said to them again, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I send you." When he had said this, he breathed on them and said to them, "Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive the sins of any, they are forgiven them. If you retain the sins of any, they are retained." But Thomas, who was called the twin, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands, and put my finger in the mark of the nails in my hand in his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were again in the house, and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were shut, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Do not doubt, but believe." Thomas answered him, "My Lord, my God." Jesus said to him, "Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen, and yet they come to believe." Now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. So just as we do every week, I will set a timer for 5 minutes. And we'll see if I have 5 minutes worth of stuff to say about this passage. And if not, hopefully it's enough to kind of get you moving this week. So the first thing that sticks out to me in this passage is the disciples are doing something after Easter that I think fits really well with the text at the end of Mark that we engaged on the show last week and that 7th Street engaged this past Sunday. So Mark, as we talked about, has this original ending, and then there's more added onto the end if you missed it last week. And it ends with the women who have gone to the tomb to put spices on Jesus' body arriving, seeing that he's not there, and then running and terrified. They're terrified, amazed, and silent. And it's not the ending to Easter that we traditionally think about or look for. We like a tight story with a happy ending. And here in John, the story goes a good bit further than it does in Mark. And we start here just before this. Jesus has encountered Mary Magdalene, and so we've seen Jesus again for the first time, meeting Mary, and then we see this scene here where the disciples had met and were locked in a room because they were afraid. I think when we come to Easter, the two words that we think about most often, that were most often preached on, or even at my church this week, we had two banners up behind where we had the worship service that said hope and joy, which are two good, necessary, beautiful words to focus on, themes to focus on for Easter, and something that's a relief after Lent. But I think especially this Monday after Easter, coming back to a world that, yes, there is hope and joy. There's vaccinations that are going out, particularly in the United States, but I know more slowly in other parts of the world as well. There is still a lot of things that don't always feel like they've experienced the hope and joy that's promised on Easter, the day after. Sometimes I think about this as an Easter hangover, right? Like you get high on the hope and joy that we experience in Easter. And then when we get to Monday after Easter, there's fear that sets back, and there's reality that sets back in. There's, for me, this kind of feeling like I want to be like the disciples. I want to lock myself in a room and just be safe. I don't want to go back out into the world and encounter the fear, the anxiety that's present there. And what Jesus does here, I think, is pretty powerful. Jesus appears in the room, and you've probably, if you've been around church, you've heard sermons on that before, and enters and says, "Peace be with you." And he shows them his hands and his side, and he says, "As my Father has sent me, so I send you." It's a reminder that what's happening on Easter Sunday is not something that you get to just put in a box and take home with you and keep safe. Right? There's a responsibility on the other side of Easter. There's a responsibility to take what has happened, that hope and that joy, the resurrection, the new life that we as Christians claim, and to go into the world and sow that life, right? Live that life out. It's not just something that we get to go into a room and hold for ourselves and keep safe and worry about the outside world and what it might do to us. No, the calling is not to be in that room, to allow Jesus through the resurrection to break into those spaces that we lock ourselves in, and allow us to move out, allow us to be people in the world, not just people trying to be separate from or hiding from it. At the end of this text, we get the somewhat famous story of Thomas, doubting Thomas, is he's been called before, and I've heard a number of sermons where we turn the doubting Thomas thing on its head, right? Where Thomas is faithful in other parts of the New Testament. But here we do get a Thomas who refuses to believe until he sees. And I find myself having a lot of sympathy for Thomas, right? Like, no, I'm not going to believe that this man came back from the dead. Why would I believe that? I have no prior experience with my teacher rising from the dead. Why would I expect him to do so now? So I have a tremendous amount of sympathy for Thomas for being only willing to believe once he has seen Jesus and seen the scars that he bears. So that is right at 5 minutes. Yeah, I'm unsure of what to do with this text. I think it's a text that preaches very well. I think it's a text that is rich for more exploration. I so often want to put myself in the place of the disciples. They're in John's gospel particularly are the people that I think we relate to the most. The people that struggle, they're the people that seem the most human. In John, Jesus, I often find feels much more unreachable, divine, than Jesus in some of the other gospels. And so it's the disciples that I connect with. And so I'm interested to spend some time sitting with and thinking about, what does it feel like to be a disciple? What does it feel like to be Thomas? What does it feel like to be one of the 12 as they grieving, as they're reacting to the trauma, and then encountering what we might describe as paranormal or a miracle, or just the shocking revelation that the person that they just watched die is no longer dead. So that is it for this episode of Reading the Bible is Easy-ish. So grateful for you joining this week. I hope you enjoyed it. Please reach out to the show and give feedback. If you'd like, you can do that by rating and reviewing on Apple or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can do that on YouTube as well. And if you have any comments or guests that you'd like to suggest for the show, you can do that by emailing me at readingthebibleiseasyish@gmail.com. Should be up in the right-hand corner of your screen. Again, thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you back here next week. Until then, keep trying to read the Bible.